Vegas, and the evidence of how well she did is in cold hard facts. In ratings, Trump's favorite thing, 22% up from Donald Trump's acceptance speech. 7.2 million raised between 11 p.m. and midnight over the course of the entire week. ActBlue says over $100 million came in for Democratic candidates, organizations. There was a panel of undecided Pennsylvania voters, a focus group, 8 of them in there. 6, after watching the speech, are now going with Kamala Harris. Those are all hard facts that show that she did a really good job. We know about the enthusiasm being up. We know about the polls going in her direction.
As we head towards November the 5th, Election Day, we will try to, as often as possible, give you the latest polls and your opportunity just to see how the race is going. One of the number one people, I think, across the whole of America when it comes to polling is Steve Kornacki. Let's just evaluate how he sees the fact that RJK has jumped ship and has wrapped himself firmly around the whatever part of the orifice you'd like to describe, none of it's very particularly pleasant or complimentary, of a former guy.
Kornacki. So, Steve, talk to me about the poll numbers. What might RFK's dropping out and endorsing Trump do?
Yeah, small but potentially significant. I mean, that's the story in a close election. Take a look at it this way. Here's the polling before Kamala Harris became the Democratic candidate, the 3-way polling. And, Kennedy, on average, this is nationally, had been running just over 9%. You see, Trump had been leading Biden. Now, Biden gets out of the race. Harris replaces him. Here's what you got. This is basically an average of a month's worth of polls now. And obviously, you got Harris taking the lead over Trump, improving on Biden. At the same time, there it is. Kennedy, as Vaughn was just saying, dropping in the polls from an average of over 9 to barely 5 points, almost cut in half his support there. Now, here's the interesting part. Harris in the 3-way polls right now, leading Trump. You can see there that difference between Harris and Trump is 2.7 points. What if you take Kennedy out of the equation? What do the polls show that are just Harris versus Trump? The average of those polls, it's this. Harris continues to lead, but the margin's reduced. Again, it's 2.7 points for Harris on average in 3-way polls. It is 1.6 for Harris on average in national 2-way polls, a difference of 1 point. So when we say small but potentially significant, again, we're talking about, think of 2020, Georgia 12,000 votes, Arizona 10,000 votes, Wisconsin 20,000 votes. A 1 point difference in places like that could potentially be enormous in a close race like that. And what's particularly interesting is, again, we see Harris's support rising since she got in and Kennedy's falling. Seems to be a pretty clear relationship there in some cases. 2 groups that Kennedy has fallen the most with, 2 groups of voters, are the 2 groups that Harris has risen the most with. Show you this. Latino voters. Kennedy had been polling fairly well there when Biden was the Democratic candidate. He's dropped 9 points of support among Latinos in the same stretch of time. Harris has gained 12 points over where Joe Biden was running. Young voters, those under 30. Again, Kennedy had been polling strongly here, fallen 8 points since Kamala Harris became the Democratic candidate. Meanwhile, voters under 30, Harris is doing 17 points better than Biden. So it certainly seems that when you see Kennedy's overall support dropping, there was a kind of Democratic-friendly share of the Kennedy vote that wasn't there for Biden that is now there for Harris. That's reduced the Kennedy vote to what you're seeing. And what's left of the Kennedy vote maybe is a little bit more Trump-friendly. And so if Kennedy leaves, the potential certainly seems to be there for Trump to benefit a little. But of course, it's politics. It's all potential. It's all possibility. We'll see how it actually.
In a moment, we will do with Steve Kornacki just explaining the race to 270. If you're like me, trying to get your head around it all, 270 is the magic number. But first, let's crunch some of the latest numbers just to give you an indication in what up for play, the different states, what's red, what's blue. These are the latest polling figures. Who's going to win, Trump or Kamala?
State to see where the
election stands. Let's get all of the solid states out of the way. Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, South Carolina, West Virginia, Kentucky, Missouri, Kansas, the majority in Nebraska, both of the Dakotas, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, Maine, Nebraska at large, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, and Alaska are all firmly in Trump's column. On the other side, Washington, California, Hawaii, Colorado, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maryland, and the District of Columbia and Maine's first are all solidly in Kamala's column. That puts Trump at 219 electoral votes, Harris at 191. According to the national polling averages, Harris currently holds a pretty significant lead over Trump, a reversal from when she initially trailed following Biden's dropout. Kennedy stands at 4%, although he is now officially dropped. Overall, we see that Harris leads around 3%, but the popular vote does not determine the winner. The Electoral College does require us to dive into the battleground. Starting that will ultimately decide this election. Nevada shows Harris with a solid lead, up by 6 points. The state has been trending blue in recent elections and looks likely to stay in the Democratic column. Nevada has been a swing state in recent cycles, narrowly favouring Democrats in the last 4 presidential elections. The poll was conducted over a somewhat large period, but does sample likely, meaning it's probably a decent poll. Harris's lead here suggests she may be consolidating Democratic support in this critical swing state. Real fast, only a fraction of you viewers are subscribed, so please can you press the subscription button. Arizona presents Trump with a hold in a narrow 1 point. This traditionally Republican state has become more competitive in recent cycles, flipping to the Democrats in 2020. For the first time since 96. The poll was conducted by the same pollsters who conducted Nevada's latest poll. Again, meaning it might not be the best, but nonetheless does indicate a tight race in which Trump regaining ground in New Mexico strongly favours Kamala's point lead. State has consistently voted Democratic and presidential elections and appears set to continue that trend. Harris's strong showing allows her campaign to focus resources elsewhere. Georgia gives Trump a comfortable 4-point lead. This state was a major upset for Democrats in 2020. Voting blue in a presidential election for the first time since 1992, Trump's lead suggests Georgia may be swinging back to its Republican roots, a significant shift that could impact the overall election result. North Carolina shows Harris with a razor-thin lead of 1 point. This traditionally Republican state has become a battleground in recent elections, going for Obama in 2008, but returning to the fall for the Dems the Republicans to the Dems in 2012, 2016 and 2020. Harris's slim advantage indicates a highly competitive situation that could go either way. Virginia leans towards Harris with a 3-point advantage. The state has voted blue in the last 4 presidential elections after being reliably Republican for decades. Harris's lead suggests Virginia may be solidifying its status as a Democratic-leaning state. Through the margin indicates the reach for Trump. Pennsylvania is tilting towards Trump with a slim point lead. Crucial swing state has flipped between parties, voting Democrat from 1992 to 2012, flipping to Trump in 2016 and then back to Biden in 2020. Trump's narrow advantage could be a key factor in the overall race, given Pennsylvania's status as a must-win state for both candidates. Michigan presents a strong showing for Harris, up by 7 points. This state was part of the blue wall that Trump breached in 2016, but swung back to the Democrats in 2020. Harris's significant lead suggests she may be rebuilding Democratic strength in this crucial Midwestern battleground. Wisconsin also favours Harris with a solid 6-point lead. Like Michigan, the state flipped to Trump in 2016. Before we turn into the Democratic column in 2020, Harris's advantage here, she may be consolidating support in the upper Midwest, a region critical to Democratic electoral college strategies. Minnesota shows Harris with a comfortable 7-point lead, despite being considered a battleground. Minnesota has consistently voted Democrat in presidential elections since '76. Harris's strong performance suggests the state is likely to remain in the Democratic column through although Trump's campaign was embarrassed and was hoping of flipping it. New Hampshire leans towards Harris with a 5-point advantage. This state has voted Democratic in 7 of the last 8 presidential elections. Harris's lead indicates New Hampshire is likely to go with the trend, though its state of a swing state means both campaigns are likely to contest it vigorously. Means statewide vote is leaning Democratic, continuing its trend from recent elections. However, Maine's 2nd congressional district, which Trump won in 2016 and 2020, remains competitive and could once again split from the state. Overall, Nebraska's 2nd congressional district is also leaning Democratic, presenting a potential pickup opportunity in this typically red state. This district went for Biden in 2020, and Harris's campaign is likely to target again as part of their electoral college strategy. Looking at the overall electoral college map, these state-by-state numbers suggest a competitive race with advantages for each candidate in different regions. Harris appears to be holding on to her 2020 coalition with strong showings in the upper northwest and growing strength in southwestern states like Nevada and Arizona. Trump, meanwhile, is showing resilience in the South. I'm not a political pollster or an expert, just giving you some facts and information that is available for you to crunch and come to any conclusion you decide. Polls are important to some people, though, particularly the former guy.
Let me ask you this, sir. There has been a huge appeal and momentum for women voters. She's trying to pull the youth vote, the Hispanic vote, the black vote back in her direction. Polls show that she's having some success in that at this point. So what are you going to do? What's your strategy to rebuild the momentum that you had with those voters?
No, she's not having success. I'm having success. I'm doing great with the Hispanic voters. I'm doing great with black men. I'm doing great with women because women want safety. They want safety. And they don't have safety when they have somebody allowing 20 million people into our country, many of them very dangerous people. No, it's only in your eyes that they have that, Martha. We're doing very well in the polls. We're leading in most of the polls. And in the swing states, we're leading in almost every one of them.
Mr. President, let me interrupt.
The auto workers are voting for me because you're not going to have an auto industry if she gets elected. They're going to all electric cars.
Coming on board in what, is being described in some quarters as the ultimate battleground state. It's the crown jewel everybody wants.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's break this thing out. The road to 270 map, we're going to be using it a lot between now and Election Day. What you got here, one way to look at this is how the race looked in terms of the road to 270 all year, and then how it looks since Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden at the end of July. So how it looked all year was we had 6 largely recognized core battleground states, and you could really divide them easily into 2 groups. This was pre-Harris, and it was basically the Sun Belt states, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, were the best for Trump when he was running against Joe Biden. One of the key reasons for that was Trump had shown marked improvement among non-white voters, also among younger voters in the polling relative to how he had done in 16 and 20. And in diverse states like Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, that was popping up in the polls. Meanwhile, states with older populations, more white populations, like Wisconsin, certainly, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they've been very strong for Trump in 16, but he hadn't grown his support as much there the way he had in the Sun Belt. So what it shaped up as was, from Trump's perspective, these were, let me select his name and show you, from Trump's perspective, these were his 3 ripest targets, and if he had gotten those, he would have been right there on the cusp of 270, 268, needing just one of the 3, let's call them Big Ten states. And the Biden strategy, this is Harris's name now, but when Biden was in the race, it was this. It was basically hang on for dear life in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and it gets you to exactly 270, and you win the election by that kind of a margin. If Trump could just break into one of those states with the Sun Belt, he wins the presidency. That's what it was. Now, since Harris got in, she's shown improvement in the polls overall. Go into the crosstabs. Where is the improvement most specifically demographically? Double-digit gains she has posted relative to Biden with Hispanic voters, with young voters, also to some degree with independent voters. But what does that mean for this road to 270 map? Well, again, think of where Trump made his gains. Hispanic voters, non-white voters, places like Arizona and Nevada. Harris's polling has improved markedly in those states relative to Biden. Also, something we've seen is a state that Democrats have talked about making a battleground. There's been a lot of skepticism. North Carolina. Remember, Trump won this by 75,000 votes in 2020. There's actually been a couple of polls recently that now have Harris ahead, like a point we're talking about here, but actually have her ahead in North Carolina. There's Georgia as well. Interestingly, of all the battleground states right now, Trump is doing his best in Georgia. But what you see here is, because of those gains Harris has made, because of where they come from demographically, it's opening up potential paths for her in what had been Trump's strongest area of the battleground. And so if you start to play this out, there's a million different ways you can do this. But look, let's say there's a scenario here where, Trump gets Pennsylvania, you mentioned it. It's the biggest of all these battleground states, 19 electoral votes. But now, previously under Biden, that would have been it. Game over. But again, if Harris were to say win Arizona, okay, and then if she were to get North Carolina, again, this is just one of many, many possibilities. You see, she's opened up a Sun Belt path here that allows her to lose the biggest individual swing state on the map. That was not the case when Joe Biden was the candidate. Right now, at least, we'll see if this sustains, but right now, at least, that possibility is alive for Democrats with Harris.
Real quick, Steve, just as we talk about 4 minutes away, 3 minutes away from the start of things getting kicked off for night 3 of the Democratic National Convention, Tim Walz going to be the big headline tonight. What is the Walz factor here as it relates to, his state of Minnesota? This is a state, Republicans all talk about it. They like to think they have a play there. It's obviously a blue state and has been for a long time. But there is a sense that Tim Walz can help in some of those Rust Belt battlegrounds, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, that is their hope. And let me see if I can call this up on the fly right here.
I'm doing a very rude thing and tossing this to you without having told you I was going to ask.
No, I love it because I love getting into the Minnesota county map. And here you go. You could see here.
I bet you do.
In 2020, Biden won this by 7. It was actually close in 2016. Trump actually got 2.5 points from victory here. I think the thing to keep in mind here, and I'm just seeing if I can get it up. Unfortunately, I can't. I'm going to tell you very quickly then. Here's the thing for Democrats. They see that they think Walz has a cultural appeal and a cultural connection in places, in the areas of a state like Minnesota or Wisconsin for that matter, or Michigan for that matter, that Trump has made the biggest gains. Rural areas with large non-college white populations. You see, I think you were showing that video stressing that he's a hunter, that sort of thing. They think that's going to not win them back those areas, but maybe get them a critical extra chunk of votes in those places. The problem for Walz is, we'll see if it's different now. He's being marketed, by different people nationally. But when he was in Minnesota in 2022, his performance in that state, just in terms of where his votes came from, it's the exact same distribution as it was for Joe Biden. Heavy Twin Cities metro area, very, loses by huge margins in the rural